I think that to a student, and I hoped that this would be the case, learning online and communicating collaboratively through these online platforms is becoming more of a habit and more of a rule than it is an exception. For me, however, it was innovative and it was exciting to see all of this work kind of come together in a shared way that students could, as they had to do it several times, critique one another's findings, and that they could also share their innovations. They could, in a relatively protected fashion, they could show off what they had done with their learning and with their research over the course of the semester with everybody else in the class. And they could see the variety of outcomes that's possible from people working with common resources, common materials, but asking different questions of those materials. The students had two or three, I guess three separate opportunities, we could say requirements, to get online and look up other people's work that interested them for whatever reason, and then to respond to it, to ask questions of it, to suggest additional historical resources that could help inform a collected artifact and that sort of thing. I think that, as with all of my classes now, simply reminding a student of what it means to be civil and of what it means to converse in a constructively critical fashion online is one valuable lesson. They typically, I will have them go to online sites and find for me, the most flaming, most horrible, most abusive language, and it doesn't take long to find, so that then we can back them up and think about how to reverse that tendency and actually have useful, scholarly, creative conversations with one another. And certainly knowing that they're going to be seeing or sitting next to the person that they've critiqued 2 days later, I think is itself a valuable antidote to the sort of anonymity that, that leads sometimes to extreme language online. Whether they learn that, whether it's a habit that's going to stick with them, I don't think I adequately tested for. So it's just one among many steps along the way, I hope, of getting them to write well, not just in a kind of a distanced, formalized history paper kind of format, but to think about how that plays into their everyday professional and business conversations that they're having now and that they will have in their careers. The class's final project was an online exhibition in which students had to pose a fundamental question or a problem and then develop a thesis toward answering that. In place of writing a 8 to 10 page paper or of doing the traditional expository writing, we tried to break it down into a more manageable set of pieces, one that included not only words but also images. And so what we called an online exhibition was in many ways set up to be like the skeletal framework of a traditional humanities or social science paper. They had a space in which to create a major label, which would be akin to an introductory paragraph. They had particular spaces set aside for sub-themes to follow that introduction. And then within that, they had particular spaces set aside for examples. In other words, if you looked at it as a teacher, you would see basically that we were teaching them how to write an extended essay or a narrative based on research. What advantage it allowed for the students was they could think of it piece by piece. They could think, what is my starting label? What is my ending label? What images am I going to use as the main picture for each section that comes between the introduction and the end, and what specific examples will take me from this sub-theme to the next to the next. How are they related, and how do they contrast? So I think it was a very good exercise in getting them to think about vision and image as being integrally related to idea and text. How much they get the same kick that I get out of looking at, for instance, the main gallery introductions, where they can see thumbnails from all of their classmates' exhibits that relate to that particular theme or question, and they can click directly on them and go to these worlds, really different worlds that people have created within common themes. How much of that they share with me, I can't really say. And in fact, the fact that that was the final project means that we didn't have a chance to do more follow-up afterward, to have them critique one another, or to have them talk about what they learned or didn't learn, and so on. That's the thing that they turned in at the very end. I, as an instructor, do get some enjoyment out of looking at that, and it's so different from staring at the pile of papers that was turned in on the last day of class and thinking, am I ever going to read these again? This is something, on the other hand, that does give me pleasure and gives me a certain measure of accomplishment, that I can go to the site, I can click on one or another of the galleries and look at all of the exhibits that have been created within that. That will last, and as long as the students have access to the site, it will last for them if they care to go back and inspect. One of the big challenges was precisely to really interrogate images and not just to use them as backup. And this is a challenge that doesn't just face an 18-year-old college student, it faces professional museum curators. The all too frequent use of illustration or image among historians and even in museums is simply as backup for an idea. That is, I'm going to make an assertion and I'm going to look wherever I can and find something that kind of looks like that assertion, rather than beginning with the image as evidence and drawing out of it an assertion that looks different from how it might have been formed without the analysis of some visual resource. So the big challenge for these students was to do that, was to use those images actively and to speak to them, so that in their collecting phase and then in their exhibiting phase for the final project, they were really meant to tell us something about what we see, to help us learn from what we see, not to just have an idea and then a kind of an image there as backdrop or as confirmation. That, I think, is a hard lesson, and one that really requires follow-up as one goes along. And the fact that you're asking me actually kind of reminds me that it's something that I could work with much more explicitly in the class itself. I'm modeling it all the time, yes. I mean, my classes are all PowerPoint based, and the PowerPoint is all visual based rather than textual based, as most students expect. That is, they want the latter and they don't get it from me. But on the other hand, in addition to modeling it, I could be provoking it. I could be doing more work in the classroom of showing contrasting images and getting them to draw out meaning from them. One of the things that was unique about this class was it was designed, experimentally anyway, as a gateway to not just what I study, but to the field of history generally. And the chief means for doing that, which I haven't mentioned yet, was the fact that we had a large number, average of one a week, of guest lectures. There were other professors from the history department who were brought in and given the general assignment, talk about a city that you care about at your time, at your moment when something critical happens. So they saw a dozen or more history professors doing their own thing in their own way about their own place, and they could see the richness of historical pursuit, how individualized it can be, and hopefully then be encouraged to take more classes from those professors that they liked, or to see how wide-ranging was the work that you could do as a history major. Certainly, for some of them, what is the impediment of studying more history and programs like it has to do with the heavy reading and writing load. The reading we didn't really let up on. The writing did come in smaller spurts, and it was provoked by visual imagery and interrogation of visual resources. I'm sure that appeals to certain students that might not otherwise enjoy a history class, and it represents an extra challenge to certain other students who just don't look that way, or don't see the world in quite the same inquisitive ways that I'd like them to. So I think it's got its ups and its downs, but overall it was part of the general design of attracting people into history courses generally, and maybe more specifically into the major in the future. But we decided that there were other advantages to Google. I just feel that there are others out there, or others waiting to be developed, that could help to integrate word, image, resource and reading, and conversation in a way that a history or other humanities class is likely to do in the future, whether it's specific to my topic or on something quite different.